What an exciting story from the Gospel of Matthew. And the great thing about 4 Gospels is we kind of get them mixed up on the Easter story. All of them kind of flow together. We do that with the Christmas story too. And I just wanted to remind you about singing on Easter Sunday, just like Christmas. Like, leave it all in the field, folks, today. Sing until you can't sing. If you have to be quiet at Easter dinner, no big deal, because people know you were singing loudly in church. So they got 2 more hymns to go. Anyway, we get the stories all mixed together, and it's great to look at a gospel lesson, like one gospel's version of the story at a time, because they all have these little interesting things to pay attention to. And this is what I want to talk to you about today: earthquakes. I wanted to talk to you, and I mentioned this last week in passing, when Jesus rode into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. It said the city was in turmoil, and last week I said that's from the Greek word seismos, which is where we get the word seismic, okay? Seismic activity. And so it said Jerusalem was all in turmoil, but it really was like, if you get to the roots of it, Jerusalem was quaking. Jerusalem was shaking upon Jesus' entrance. Well, guess what? Matthew doesn't stop using the word. In fact, at the moment of Jesus' death in the Gospel of Matthew, it says the curtain was torn and the earth trembled at his death. Seismos. Okay? Then in our story today, what happens? You didn't listen. Angel comes down, white as snow, and moves. And I'm just like, last night I just had this image of the earth, angel coming down and just going flick, and the tombstone just rolled away, and it was like an earthquake. The sound of it, everything shook like an earthquake. Okay, seismos. But then what happens? Talks to the women, sends them off to announce the good news, blah, blah, blah. Tomb is empty, blah, blah, blah. I shouldn't say blah, blah, blah on Easter morning. Sends them, dodge a lightning bolt here. Tomb is empty, he is risen, he's going off to Galilee, go tell the disciples. So they take off. I've never noticed this in this image. I've used it a bunch of times. Hope the balloons aren't in your way. See behind the 2 women? There's these like reddish figures. Those are the guards. They were fearful, and they trembled as if they were dead. Okay? Guess what the word for trembled was? Seismos. Yeah, they quaked. It's a term used for agitation of the mind as well. So imagine, and the lovely Reverend Deb Walker said this morning, like being in a D-box at the movie theater, the ones that shake. Like this, don't pay for them, pay for the row in front of them, because it still shakes. Just wanted you to know. Anyway, the D-box shakes you, right? So this is what happened. The earth quakes because an angel has shown up, and you never hear of angels like the earthquake. Earthquakes, angel shows up, flicks the stone away, and the trembling reverberates. The fear and anxiety of it agitates the minds of the guards so much that they fall down, almost as if they're dead. Look at them. Can you see? They're like ones like this. Right? I just love this quaking stuff in Matthew. 4 times quaking, quaking, quaking. Matthew wants us to pay attention to all the shaking. Whole lot of shaking going on. Shaking of the earth reverberates and agitates the minds of the guards. And the angel says to the women, first words, it's what angels always say. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. It's like in the angel handbook, right? They read it, page 1. Hey, listen, people are going to be scared of you. Say this first. Don't be afraid. Right? So the angel says, do not be afraid. And then as the story goes on, after the women have left, and I added this, I didn't realize it wasn't in the scripture on the screen. The soldiers are paid by the chief priests not to tell anybody about it. Ooh, is that a storybook or what? Imagine writing a story about those guards and how they lived the rest of their lives. Not being allowed to tell anybody because they took pay to keep it inside. Poor guys. First of all, they're shaken in their heads until they're debilitated and on the ground. Next, they finally come back and they're so excited and they want to say everything they've said and tell everybody because, wow, it was something. Chief priests gather them. Chief priests have a lot of power over their lives, their family, their salvation, everything. And they give them money. And if the chief magistrate asks, we will make it well with him. No one has to know about this. And then they say, tell them that his disciples came and stole the body, which is why there was guards there in the first place. In Matthew 27, after the death and after the burial, the chief priest Pilate sends guards there and says, make it as secure as you possibly can. Because the Romans are terrified that the disciples will come and take the body to make it seem like something mystical and wondrous has happened. Guess what? Didn't matter. Angel got involved. All the things start to shake when God gets involved in life. They meet Jesus on the road. They're so surprised and shocked, they fall to his feet and they worship him. And what does he say to them? Do not be afraid. He's not an angel, but he knows they're terrified. He says, do not be afraid. It reminds me of the Transfiguration. He reaches down, he picks Peter and the disciples and says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of this holy stuff. It's our stuff. It's for us. Don't be afraid, Jesus says. 9 times in the Gospel of Matthew, hear these words. Do not be afraid. And about 4 other times we hear the words, don't worry. Do not worry. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not be afraid. We need to hear this, folks. We need to hear this on Sunday morning, on Easter Sunday morning. Do not be afraid, because we are the people of this story. We are the shaky people. We are the earthquakey people. We are the people that know that God has risen, that new life is afoot over and over and over again. Not just 2,000 years ago, today, last Easter, next Easter, new life, new life, new life. And let me tell you, it's going to scare the pants off of people. It does, to this very day, scare the pants off people. When we truly live this Easter life. Death does not win. That should be on the front door of every Christian church. Not in remembrance of me. Not all these other things that we have in churches like, to him be the majesty and praise. It should say on the front door of Mayfair United Church, death does not win. So that people know when they come in here, we are people of God's rising life. I got a story for you. I'm going to get back on my seat. Let's cool it. Don't be afraid. Reverend Dave, coffee and Easter morning. Woo! I read this beautiful story a few weeks ago on an airplane. It wasn't in the airplane magazine. It was in a book. And it's about a tragic murder that happened in Maine many years ago. I'm not going to get into details on Easter Sunday. It's awful. It's a young woman. They had to go looking in the woods. So the game wardens were involved, because that's what game wardens do. They know the woods really well. And the story is being told by Kate Braestrup, who is the Unitarian Universalist chaplain to the game wardens. I love the idea of game wardens having a chaplain. Right? So Kate has been telling the story to the author of this book I was reading in an interview. And the game wardens have to go out and do this awful, awful job of discovery. And so they do. And they find the young woman, of course, and she's not alive. And on the scene, because it's a murder, comes a young detective. Guess what her name was? Anna Love. Detective Sergeant Anna Love. And the writer says, this is the only name I've never changed in all of my writings. I didn't change and can't change Anna Love's name. It's just too good. Detective Sergeant Anna Love comes on the scene, and in 3 days, she figures out how to find the suspect, interrogates the suspect, has to take him to the woods and talk about it, back to the scene, back and forth, interrogate, hear all the awful details, talk to witnesses, hear all this gut-wrenching stuff. Meanwhile, you ready? Anna Love, throughout the day, has to get into the lieutenant's office and pump breast milk because she has an infant at home with her husband, who is a police officer who is on leave, so that Anna could do her awesome detective work. So in the midst of this absolute horror, Detective Anna Love was also providing life and love for her little baby back at home. What a beautiful, beautiful, striking image. And as the writer says, she thinks that in America, all little girls should be playing with Detective Anna Love action figures with a magnifying glass in one hand or a badge in one hand and a breast pump in the other. Wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that be awesome? Kate Braestrup continues on in the story and says, this doesn't negate the death. It doesn't take away the tragedy. It doesn't diminish the pain. It was, she says, the kind of event when evil comes to visit so fast and so spontaneously that it's a kind of thing that shakes a community and makes them wonder, is it really safe to live here anymore? There is no denying the horror of the story. But these game wardens, with love in their hearts, went in and out of the woods, day in and day out, knowing this was a situation they would not be able to fix. They could not bring that young woman back. But they still went in community and in love, while a detective who cracked the case in 3 days sent milk home to her baby. And after all of that, this wonderful Kate Braestrup says, a miracle can only be the resurrection of love beside the unchanged fact of death. A miracle can only be the resurrection of love beside the unchanged fact of death. And if you want to know what happened on Easter Day and the day after and the weeks after and the months and years to come, 70 years later, 80 years later, Matthew is writing about what? Love that came to visit in the face the inescapable fact of death. God's love continues. And in fact, it wins. There's darkness, friends. There is tragedy. There is trauma. We've all lived too much of it. But none of this holds a stick to the power of God's love being shared, nurtured, lived out, one person to another, or in a community like Mayfair United Church. And I thank Sandra Simpson for grabbing me first this morning and saying, did you hear about Sri Lanka? For those of you who hadn't heard the news, 200 Christians have died, 200 people have died, many of them Christians, while at church in Sri Lanka yesterday on Easter Sunday morning. Bombs went off in different locations all at the same time, a couple churches and I think 3 resort hotels. All at the same time. We don't know who. Radicals, we figure. There is an element of radical, get this, radical violent Buddhist monks. Those are words I've never strung together before. Who have threatened Christian lives across Sri Lanka over the years. We don't know if it's them. But bombs went off, 200 people killed, 450 people injured on Easter morning because it was Easter morning. There is tragedy, there is trauma, and there is the inescapable fact of death all around us. But I checked my Facebook feed at 10 o'clock this morning because my friend Taruni, who we call Hetty, lives in Sri Lanka, and I have another friend who has a home there, right in Colombo. And this is what Taruni posted. On the bottom hand is a cross, Hindu symbol for peace, Buddhist symbol, Muslim symbol, on 4 hands holding each other. She also posted a news clip that said, people of all faiths come out to give blood immediately after tragedy. In Sri Lanka, that's important. People of all faiths, the newspaper said, come out to give blood. You know what? The people receiving the blood will not know if it's Hindu blood, or Buddhist blood, or Muslim blood, or Christian blood. Because, as Hetty wrote later on in her little poetic way, her wonderful poetic way, this is not my Lanka. We are more beautiful than this. And immediately, they've all started to love each other. Bigger, broader, life-changing love. Does it bring the people back? Absolutely not. Does it allow God's love to win? Absolutely Yes. Absolutely. Yes. This week, this year, friends, stop pretending. Dig in this Easter morning. Go out from this place and find a way to be God's rising in the world. Find a way to live resurrection for others, because the world badly needs us. May it be so. Happy Easter. Amen.